we got news literally an hour right before we started recording that Tyler Herro has agreed to a 4-year, what was originally reported by Adrian Wojnarowski as a $130 million extension. It has since come out of Miami that it actually looks more like a $120 million extension with $10 million in incentives. So that's about $30 million a year for Tyler Herro, with some potential for more. When you see that number, and let's assume that it's going to be your typical extension that escalates instead of de-escalates, where the number will start right around, I think I did the math on it earlier. It's like 26.5, 26.6, something like that, and then jump up to, into the mid 30s by the time that he is done with this deal. The deal will start in 2023, 24. What was your immediate reaction when you saw this, knowing that the max that Tyler Herro's starting salary actually could have been was like 33.5 million, not like 26.5 million?
Yeah, I mean, it seems like superstar money in the way that the numbers actually play out. I had to do the, oh my God, and take myself back from that a split second later and say, wait a second here. We're going to get a new CBA in a couple of years. We're going to have another projected spike in the salary cap, which means this number isn't going to be on the back end of that contract as gaudy as it really seems right now. The Miami Heat are the kings of internal development. They've proven that decade after decade at this point, not just year after year. The guys who stay in their system continually get better. So to what seems like slightly overpay a guy that they've worked with, that they might be able to see another level that he can get to, I'm okay with, but I do understand how this might affect the rest of the market in some different ways, as well as Tyler Herro at this point in his career. He pretty much has one specialty that he has on the floor, and that's put the ball in the hoop. It's valuable. I think it's oftentimes overlooked in some regards that you really do need to score the basketball at the end of the day. Yeah. So that is probably the most valuable single skill to have. But it was certainly, I was a little taken back when I saw the number first off.
It's important to keep in context the salary cap, how it's going to rise, everything like that. But let's just kind of jump into who Herro is as a player first. He averaged 21 points per game, 5 rebounds, 4 assists last year. He shot 45, 40, 87 from the field as a 22-year-old, basically. He doesn't turn 23 until January next year. He was the 2022 sixth man of the year in the NBA. There's a lot of reason, I think, to believe that he has a chance to be a 25 point per game scorer at some point. He is that efficient. He is that kind of creative in terms of his mindset. He's that good of a pull-up scorer as well. The question with Herro does simply come down to what you believe he can be in the rest of his game outside of scoring. Do you think that Tyler Herro can be, a 6 or 7 assists per game guy as he continues to grow and mature into his skill set and into his ability to break down defenders? Do you believe that he can reach, frankly, even like a passable level defensively? Because right now he is a legit negative defender that Miami kind of figures out by surrounding him with guys like Jimmy Butler, Bam Adebayo. Kyle Lowry is an incredibly smart defender. Even like Max Strus is like big and long and physical and like not a terrible defender. I actually think that Herro's deficiencies are in part why the Heat didn't get as much out of Duncan Robinson this year, because it's just really hard to have both of them on the court together at once. And that's in part due to Duncan's deficiencies, really more than anything. But I also think it's harder to get lineup mixes together that make sense with Herro, as opposed to other guys that might be just a little bit better defensively, maybe at a higher, even average level defensively. So where do you think Herro is in terms of his overall value right now?
It's a good question. I think Miami in particular is the right spot to maximize his value wherever we kind of come out in this conversation. So I think team context is always important when trying to establish value for a player. And because they have committed to surrounding him with some defensive-minded personnel and guys like Jimmy Butler, like you mentioned, I think Bam Adebayo being the long-term linchpin there is huge for Herro. That those two can coexist having a potential defensive player of the year anchoring your defense really does help you hide a guy like Herro, at least through the regular season. And that's the second part of this conversation, is in the playoffs when games are on the line. We've seen him become a guy that can really get hot and make shots. But in those moments when he's not being that guy, I do worry about, can he really be on the floor other than just being your third or fourth option, spacing the floor, ready to kick out and drive and kick to. So, their system maximizes guys who are great off handoffs, who can hit movement shots, and they run a lot of, slip screening actions, fake back screens for a guy like Adebayo, then curling off for a handoff around the elbows. Like, Herro is really, really smart in those areas at such a young age. I wonder what level there is to tap into that even further, as opposed to probably the next step in his development needs to be being a 2-to-1 assist to turnover ratio guy and creating 5 to 6 baskets for his teammates a game.
Yeah, I mean, he's pretty close to the 2-to-1 assist to turnover ratio as it is. I think he was there last year. It's just that, can he be like a 6 or 7 assist guy?
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, can he like really be that level playmaker? Yeah. It's funny, like, he's had playoff success, but like, I thought his first year in the playoffs was a little bit better than last year. And like, look, last year he just struggled to shoot it, right? And we don't think that Tyler is going to struggle to shoot it. But having said that, like, I think you can also ascribe some of this to role, right? Like, Herro's role was a little bit different last year in terms of the self-creation responsibilities that were on his plate, as opposed to what it was during his rookie season, where it was just like, all right, we're just going, right? Like, it's Tyler. If he gets hot, great. If he doesn't, that's okay too. He's coming off the bench regardless, and he's trying to get going. I don't know. Look, and this is where the other part of this conversation, I think, comes in now. I think that this is probably an overpay right now. I think that $30 million is probably more than Tyler Herro is worth right now. I think he's probably worth in the range of 20, 22. If we're being honest, like, he just got CJ McCollum money, right? And I think CJ is a little bit better of a player, more well-rounded playmaker, a little bit more efficient as a shot creator. But Tyler is also 23, whereas CJ is in his 30s. And you would think that Tyler is going to grow into this in a real way. He's going to get better. By the time Tyler Herro is 25, he's probably going to be better than he is at 22, 23. And this contract doesn't kick in until his age 24 season. The bigger context here, though, is the incoming TV money. And I think that is where people are going to be stunned with the contracts that we see over the next couple of weeks. Really, the only deal that I think is going to look, at first glance like a bargain is Keldon Johnson. That Keldon Johnson deal, I have no idea why he signed that. This is a guy that I think has a very good chance to average 20 points per game this year, especially given the role and the responsibilities he'll be asked to, kind of contribute to this season. That deal is going to look incredibly like a bargain over the course of its life. And that's because I like Keldon, but also because just his role and his size and he's not like an awesome, incredible defender, but he's an average defender that isn't as good offensively as Herro, isn't as well-rounded offensively as Herro. But I think it's a little bit easier to make lineups that make sense with him defensively. If I was rating those two as players, I would have Herro a little bit ahead. I wouldn't have him drastically ahead of Keldon Johnson. And Keldon Johnson just got, 2/3 of the deal that Tyler Herro did. And that's not to say that Herro isn't deserving of it, because the TV money here is going to skyrocket. I've seen projections from just people doing back of the napkin math, right? Where it's like $170, $180 million salary cap by the time that Tyler Herro is in like the middle of this contract, let's say. I don't want to put a year on it, because then people will start aggregating, and I don't really want to do that. This is all like projection. It's all based on, projected numbers. And there are a lot of factors that could really come into this that make this look a little bit different, right? What happens if the league expands? So Adam Silver stated during the NBA finals that, quote, expansion is not being discussed at this time. But he also then in that same answer said that invariably he believes that the league will expand some point into the future. Expansion, rumors, public discourse, let's say maybe, are pretty pervasive, right? Like it's a real thing that occurs quite often because I think people around the league think it's going to happen at some point. When, I have no idea, but Adam Silver even said invariably he believes expansion will happen at some point. It's just when expansion is going to occur. So that would potentially drop the cap a little bit. It is worth noting, John Hollinger pointed this out to me, and then I went and looked up the number. When the Bobcats entered the league in 2003, 2004, whatever year that was, they only had 66% of the salary cap that other teams did. So it's, early on, teams would have a bit of a higher number than what that would be. So that would create more basketball related income going to the other teams. But having to split the pie of basketball related income 32 ways instead of 30 for the players would mean that salary caps, don't rise quite as much. What is that number going to be? It ultimately depends on what the TV deal comes in at, which we don't know what the number is. So there are a lot of factors to consider here, but the biggest key here is that ultimately the TV money from this next deal is going to absolutely skyrocket the salary cap. And because of that, it's really, really hard for a team to sign a young player entering their prime to a contract that is going to look completely ridiculous. Like when Jamal Murray comes up for his next contract, assuming that Jamal Murray is who he has been throughout the course of his career, coming off of this ACL injury, if the salary cap is like what people are expecting that's the salary cap to be, he's going to sign something insane, like a 5-year, like $275 to $325 million contract, depending on how big the number is with the TV deal, right? Like he's going to be making well over $50 million a year if he is still a max player when he's 27 years old or 26 years old coming off of this knee injury. So like, it's just worth keeping in mind that what Herro is getting now and where the salary cap is now and what it'll be in 2023, 24. Sure, maybe it's probably an overpay a little bit, but it's going to be really hard for this not to look like a bargain if he continues to average 20 points per game by the time it's like, 2026.
Well, and that's why you don't mind if it escalates on the back end of the contract in the way that it normally does. Is, you might be a little bit hamstrung in years 1 or year 2, but this ends up looking like a bargain by the end of it. So knowing that there's this anticipated spike, I'm trying too hard not to judge the numbers and the actual dollars and cents of a deal like this. But I think that if it's going to be successful, it always has to be contingent on Tyler getting better in a couple of different areas. If it's not the defensive end, that it needs to be creating with the ball in his hands.